So we really enjoyed the film, and it was kind of throwback to your guerrilla filmmaking era. So I would like to know if it was the same for you, even when shooting the film, if you can talk about the connection with the apolitical organization.
Yes, so I mean, this project kind of came out of left field. It started out as a fashion shoot for a magazine in which I was referencing Teorema. I wanted to do kind of a sci-fi updating of it, and it was a magazine called Doesn't Exist that dedicates each issue to one artist. So they dedicated one to me. They did one to Antonioni. They did one to Greenaway, you know. And then they were based in London, and they were trying to find a way to bring me to London, and they had met @HOBO, and they suggested we do some kind of collaboration. So I suggested, why not make, for the magazine, it was supposed to be like doing a photo shoot for a movie as if it existed. Okay. So I did the production stills for a pretend movie, basically. Yeah. And I said, well, why don't I make the real movie? And so, and I had been meaning to, for a long time, to try to do a remake of 𝗂𝗏 from way back in the late 90s. I was going to do it with Tony Ward, the star of Hustler White, at one point. I even talked through certain people to Marina Abramovich at one point of doing one collaboratively. And so I think it was, yeah, we were talking about getting Catherine Deneuve to play the Sylvana Magano character, which would have been amazing. Yeah. But anyway, so then, but you know, Apolitical is more of, it's like a nonprofit arts, you know, organization. They support artists whose work is too difficult or weird or expensive or controversial to get supported by the mainstream art world. Yeah. So so they had seen my films, especially Raspberry Reich, which they really liked because they're very into political art. Even though they're called apolitical, they're actually into very highly political art. They support artists like André Serranos and André Malodkin and Santiago Sierra and Franco B. and Castles, and so so I really fit into what they're trying to do, and you know, we had a very modest budget to begin with, and I wasn't paying attention to the money aspect of it all. I just said, let's do it, and it really did take me back to the guerrilla days, because even though they did have permits and things like that, it was really on the fly. It was like, I didn't have much of a script going into it, just like 𝗂𝗄𝗏, I virtually had no script when I went to that film. In fact, this film to me feels like a kind of companion piece to 𝗂𝗄𝗏. We got, you know, stopped by the police several times, like in the old days, trying to worm our way out of, like, you know, situations with public nudity and things like that, and then just the spirit of it. I mean, at one point we shot all the porn scenes in the basement, the exhibition space of Apolitical, and one night we invited the public. We announced online and everything invited the public to come and watch us shoot one porn scene, and we had. I built a wall with like peepholes in it, and people were looking through, watching us shooting porn, and there was a live feed from the camera to monitors on the second floor where people came. A lot of people, like several hundred people came to watch us shooting. So it was that spirit of more of an art project, something kind of trying to be more conceptual, more thinking about, you know, about the whole spectatorship and how people watch porn, and then when we shot in the south of France, I didn't have an ending. I missed some scenes in London, and I didn't have an ending. So 𝗵𝗃, the director of Apolitical, suggested we go down to André Malodkin's foundry in the Pyrenees in the south of France, which is near Lourdes. So we shot in Lourdes, and so we shot in some beautiful locations that really elevated the movie. But it was like long days, 14, 16-hour days, but we shot the whole thing in 10 days. So.
What kind of a relationship do you think there is between Pasolini's work and Fassbinder's work, which is another great inspiration for you?
Yeah, well, in that theater piece, I particularly made a connection between Teorema and Fassbinder's 𝗿•, which were made almost at the same time. I mean, 𝗿•'s 1970, I think, and Teorema is 68. And, it's about, I think he was, I wouldn't be surprised if Fassbinder had, consciously based it on Teorema, because it's about a family. It's a Southern Gothic, and there's like this plantation owner and his wife and his two sons, and one of the sons is kind of mentally challenged, and 𝗂𝗃𝗄𝗏, his famous black actor, comes to the family. He was a slave, and he ends up fucking the son and the mother and of the family, and then he actually destroys them all. He ends up killing them all. So for me, it's like the Teorema narrative has become as significant as the Searchers narrative. That Schrader and people like Schrader and Scorsese are obsessed with. It's this idea of a character, usually an outsider, usually a kind of a hustler like character who comes and to some sort of family and totally disrupts them, sexually kind of liberates them, and then leaves them, and then they're all transformed in some way, either for better or worse.
Dire che comunista non è la parola esatta, sono marxista. Infatti non sono iscritto al Partito Comunista, e anzi sono spesso in polemica con il Partito Comunista Italiano. Li accusavo di essere appunto ancora post-stalinisti, di non aver criticato abbastanza profondamente, abbastanza radicalmente lo stalinismo. Quindi la definizione esatta è che sono marxista, cioè accetto una diagnosi della società di tipo marxista e trovo che le soluzioni per il futuro sono quelle indicate da Marx.
Do you consider yourself a Marxist?
Well, that's, I would say I'm a Marxist sympathizer. I would say if I had to identify my politics, I'd say I'm more of an anarchist, like an anarcho-syndicalist. But I certainly, studied Marx. My professor Robin Wood was quite a Marxist in university, so I certainly was schooled in that when I was in university. I'm definitely anti-capitalist. So, yeah, I mean, for me, Pasolini, his philosophy really does embrace all sorts of contradictions, and contradictory things can exist simultaneously. So even in the writing of I read the novel Pasolini wrote concurrently with the movie Teorema, and in that, even in the writing, it's so beautiful, it's very poetic, but he talks about a lot of contradictions. Like when he describes the visitor, he says that he's both arrogant and kind of humble at the same time. Like, so you can't, they're opposites, but they exist simultaneously in the visitor. So I was thinking a lot about those kinds of contradictions. Of course, yes, he was a Marxist, but kind of deeply Catholic on a certain level, perhaps an atheist, but still believed in spiritual transformation or spirituality. It's also, and of course, also just more literally in terms of like class analysis. Yeah. And he believes in he has this kind of Spinozan idea that God is embodied in everything, and especially the sub-proletariat, lumpen proletariat, and he actually thinks that that's where God exists, or he thinks that animals are kind of like elevated spiritually because of their innocence. And so at the same time, he was like a kind of very cultured man. You know, he was very an erudite like poet. So, but yet he was attracted to these you know, young hustlers, men who were uneducated, and for him that was like, they represented something very pure and very spiritual for him. So those are the kinds of contradictions that I was trying to also achieve with The Visitor. I made a film for Erika Lust called a feature porn film called 𝗿𝗵𝗵𝗃 of Lydia 2 years ago, and that's the first time I worked with an intimacy coordinator. And she never worked on a porn film before. She'd only worked on in mainstream film as an intimacy coordinator. So I kind of had to explain porn to her and the different protocols and the positions and double penetration and all these terms, and how the actors like injected their penises with something to make them hard, and you know. So it wasn't very, for me it was kind of like it wasn't that helpful, but you know, and also my producer and I, 𝗂𝗶𝗰𝗀𝗀𝗃, who've made quite a lot of porn films together over the years. It's something that we did just, you know, instinctually. You know, we talked to the actor. We acted as intimacy coordinators. We talked to the actors. You cast people that have sexual chemistry. You make sure that they aren't asked to do anything that on screen that they're uncomfortable with, or that they have if they have any personal issues about their body, or you know, and then also to try to make the set relaxing and conducive to the actors having sex. All that stuff we did. We just it seemed logical for us to do. You know. Having said that, on the new one with The Visitor, it was very important to have an intimacy coordinator, because four of the main actors had never done porn before. So 𝗵𝗃𝗏, who plays The Visitor, I've worked with him before. I had made a porn film with him, and Amy Kingsmill, who plays the mother, had done porn before, but the rest hadn't. Although they'd done kind of sexual performative, like sexual performance art, and so it was very important to make sure that they all were comfortable and knew what was expected of them. But our intimacy coordinator was Lydia Raviso, who turns out was from Ostia, the city that Pasolini was assassinated in, and she knew more about Pasolini than I did, and she's a director herself. She's directed films for Erika Lust, so she really was a really important collaborator in the film. Like it was more than just kind of making sure that, you know, somebody didn't step outside the boundaries. She contributed like in a very essential way to the film. Yeah, I mean, I'm really into agitprop kind of filmmaking. I was very influenced by 𝗥𝗄𝗃 and his films like you know, La Chinoise and 𝗨𝗵𝗁 soldat, and you know, so I've used a lot of text before, flashing text, usually in my film, The 𝗁𝗵𝗃𝗃, in a short porn film I did called The Purple Army Faction. This use of text, I think, is really, I think it's good to have the audience. It's a distancing technique in a way. It makes the audience aware of the direct politics, as opposed to a narrative, which sometimes can be so immersive that people don't really engage intellectually. So if you disrupt it with text, they're forced to kind of confront these kinds of political ideas. And I mean, what I did with this film was I took a lot of actual Labour Party slogans from Britain and corrupted them. So instead of the slogan "Open Borders," I changed to "Open Borders, Open Legs," and I changed for the many, not to the few. For the many, not the few. I changed to fuck for the many, not the few. So it was also a kind of a little critique of the film. Is you know, obviously against the extreme right, xenophobic, anti-immigration elements in the UK and Europe, but
in Italy too.
yeah, and Germany especially right now, and Italy. But it was also kind of I also always critique the left in my movies as well. So it was kind of a bit of a critique of how leftists and liberals can sometimes reduce their politics to sloganeering and kind of doctrinaire politics that is not necessarily very effective in fighting something as insidious as like the fascist right.